Holy doly.
What's up YouTube, SnatchPato here, and today I'm doing something a bit different from normal. Usually it's a game from my Twitch, or I'm actually playing live, but this time I'm actually doing a game analysis. It wasn't actually played by me, it was played by my friend Calanthe. Down below you can see him in the white position. He's 2143 online in Blitz, and he was playing a guy named kartheek24 who is 2119 in Blitz. They played this, and the game itself is not that interesting. Um, Spoiler alert, Black blunders pretty badly and gets mated very quickly. However, in some post-mortem work done by Calanthe, he discovered some really beautiful lines that we're going to look deeper into today. I'm going to pose some puzzles for you to solve as well. Because when I was exposed to this game, Calanthe did it in the form of puzzles. He went through the games for me, showed me a position, and said, "What would you play?" And it looked easy at first. Sometimes some of these moves look quite easily solved, but Stockfish has other things to say about that, and Stockfish has a lot of resources up his sleeve, so you're going to have to pause the video, think very critically about it, and find some pretty tough moves. I only found them there's about two or three key positions. I only found them thanks to a couple of hints from Calanthe. They're very difficult for humans to find, which is a little hint in and of itself. But first, I'm just going to run through the game. I'm not going to talk about it. I already started recording this once and I get distracted immediately by all the sidelines. So I'm just going to go through the game, show you what happened, and then we're going to take a step back. And then we're going to go through some of the things that could have happened and which leads to the interesting stuff. So the game started e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, knight d7, knight bd7, knight f3, e5, which is turning into a Philidor, bishop c4, and the first mistake of the game was c6 by Karthik. It basically doesn't address any of this pressure that is going to happen against the f7 pawn after this move knight g5, which was played. d5 is the only response, and after pawn takes, and our interesting line starts after knight takes d5, but not seeing a specific continuation, which we'll get into, which is understandable in Blitz, of course. Calanthe played bishop takes, just securing a pawn, so that if takes, knight takes, and queen a5 check, attacking the king and the knight can just drop back, which is what happened in the game. And after e takes d4, queen takes d4, Karthik made a significant blunder with bishop e7, attacking the knight, and trying to get castled, but of course undefending g7, which was happily captured. And I guess Karthik played this with the intention of playing bishop to f6, seemingly putting a lot of pressure on the queen, defending the rook. Maybe the rook comes to the g file later. However, this falls for mate in 2, which my boy Calanthe saw. So after queen takes f7 check, king to d8, knight to e6 checkmate. A beautiful checkmate and a beautiful miniature, which any of us would love to play in Blitz. However, that's not why we're here, of course. So congratulations, Calanthe, first of all, for the win. However, let's go back. Instead of bishop takes d5, what Calanthe wanted to play but didn't because he missed one key aspect of this position, I suppose. He wanted to play knight takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop takes d5. But he saw that queen a5 wins his bishop with a double attack there. And that's really good for black. So he rejected this line completely. However, there's two good things that white can play here. The first I'm going to give you, and the second I'm going to ask you to solve yourself. So the first one, when Calanthe actually gave this task to me, I found this move that I'm about to show you. And he said, oh, I hadn't seen that move. That's good too, but not the best. So here's the second best move in this position. Knight takes f7 is a very interesting move, because after king f7, bishop takes d5 check. So there's no time for this queen a5 move that would have been available in the other position. So after bishop d5 check, perhaps the king goes back to e8, and then simply castles getting out of any checks on the a5 square, and white is doing just fine in this position. Nothing winning per se, but it's very pleasant. The king can never castle, and it's stuck in the middle of the board. Rook e1's going to come, maybe some queen h5 stuff, maybe just bishop to e3, I don't know. In any case, it's really pleasant for white. So knight f7 is quite interesting. And of course, if the queen moves, perhaps with check, we're bishop to d2, which should be very sufficient because we're counterattacking the queen, and the rook's going to be on after that. Not to mention this knight's hanging if the queen goes too far away. So that's really nice for us. So this knight f7 move was nice, but not the best. So here's your first puzzle for the day. Make sure you pause the video, actually invest time in this, because at first, my embarrassingly enough to say, my first gut reaction is just turn on Stockfish, find the answer, get that instant gratification. But that's not what I'm all about now. I'm trying to learn, trying to get better, and I implore you to do the same. So have a look, see if you can figure out what white's best move is here. Pause the video now. So hopefully you paused and hopefully you found the brilliant queen h5. We're attacking f7 again, and if the queen comes out to a5 and goes for any checks or anything like that, we can probably just play bishop d2 again, like in the previous line. So we have to address this pressure on f7. Now, one of the lines against the pressure on f7 is queen to e7, which is an okay response, but it's not the critical line that we're going to be looking at today. Quickly, the problem is bishop takes d5, and we're simply up the piece. Yes, he's got this check down the e-file with the discovered attack, but we can simply play king f1, and then what are you going to do? You've got more pressure here, so you eventually have to play g6 anyway. The reason I use the word anyway is that after queen h5, the critical line that we're going to look at is after g6 by black. Now, another little pop quiz for you. Our queen's attacked, and if we're not careful, we're not going to actually pick up this extra material. Note, we're down a piece at the moment. So we'd love to pick up this, but our queen's currently attacked. What do? Pause the video. Too late. And I hope you found it. Queen f3, attack again. And we're also putting a secondary defender on the knight. So say, for example, f5 or something is played, which is just as bad as f6, which we're going to look at. Not only can we take with the queen and threaten queen f7 mate, but we can play something like bishop here, and this check no longer works because this piece is not hanging because that queen defends it. So if I go back to queen f3, the same thing happens after f6. Queen takes d5, we're threatening mate. And well, just to show it on the board, if you take the knight, it's checkmate. So f6 is no good, really no good. So what can be played? If we take this knight, right, it's hanging. So why don't we just plug the f file, excuse me. If we plug the f file, bishop takes f7 is on. And after king goes to e7, of course the knight defends the bishop. We have this beautiful swinging of the queen laterally, queen a3 check. And suddenly this king is running out of squares. In fact, it has run out of squares. So the only thing we can do is block this diagonal. The only piece we can use is a knight. We throw in a check again, and after queen to d6, queen takes d6, king takes d6, d takes e5, king takes e5, I guess, and you don't want black in this position. Even down 2 pawns for a start, but even minor pieces. But after white castles, maybe plays bishop, d2 coming to c3, the rooks are going to come and occupy the d and e files, and it's just GG for black. Good game, had fun. But after queen f3, there is a move, and this move really kick-starts the sequence of brilliant moves and really interesting defenses that can happen in these positions, and that's knight 7 to f6. So now we still plug the f file, but we no longer have this open diagonal that the bishop can look at because the knight's here. But first of all, let's give black one extra task which may be overlooked in a blitz game, and he might make a big mistake here after bishop takes d5, which is the critical line. If gut reactions, knight takes d5, queen takes f7 is mate. So, and again, another reason to give yourself positions where your opponent has only really one good move. And that's what I'm trying to do in my longer time control games anyway. It's hard to really orchestrate those in blitz. However, in longer time control games, if you can find moves where, hell, they may not even be the best move, but they give your opponent only one good response or something to that effect, then they're really good moves because you put your opponent under lots of pressure to find only moves. And making your opponent find only moves is a really powerful thing. So in this position, black's even in material but down a lot. So black has to try and prove that white's sacrifice is not sound, and therefore queen takes d5. Now, if white simply plays queen takes d5, knight takes d5, and black is in the driver's seat here, no problems. He's just up a clear piece. He's up a clear light squared bishop, and development is fine. So in this position, to maintain material equality, white has to go in for queen takes f6, and this is where it gets really, really interesting. After queen takes f6, queen takes g2 is the really sharp move in the position. Now, first of all, we throw in a check here, stop the king from ever castling, and the king's in the center of the board. However, in this position, our rook is attacked, and we really want to capitalize upon black's stuck king in the middle of the board. But finding a way to protect our rook actually proves a little bit challenging, so I'm going to give you a moment to pause the video here and try your best to find the best move, and this is probably the hardest move in the entire puzzle. Okay, the best move here, and violently counterintuitively, it's knight to f3. Knight f3 is a crazy move. Now, the obvious reaction is, Snatch, can he not just take the rook? And that was my first reaction when I saw it as well. If he takes the rook on h1, we play king e2, and we have a disgusting threat of bishop to g5 checkmate. Well, in a couple of moves, of course, because the bishop can block. But say we play a nothing move for black, just to highlight it. Bishop g5 check, bishop e7, queen takes e7 is mate. That's our threat. And that shows just one of the big secrets of knight f3 and why it was so powerful. We're basically baiting the queen to take this rook. If you try and save the queen, we're still going to play bishop b5 check, and you're going to have to sacrifice your queen, else you get mated in the way we just showed before. And this is exceptional for white as well, of course. Another option for you is maybe play h6, stops bishop g5 check. It does. You win the bishop, however you lose your queen after rook takes h1, so it's not as good, it's just as bad in fact. And I guess the only other option is to, after queen takes h1 and king e2, is to take the knight, but then simply queen takes the knight, or even possibly just as fine is king takes f3, and black has to sacrifice a queen to stay alive, and that's not good. So taking the rook is no good for black. And if they play a move, say for example h6, trying to stop this threat, then we can play rook g1, another exclam move, because we're basically saying our rook's going to come into the game and you're toast, black. Because after queen h3, queen f6 as well. We can either take on g6 or our queen forks the rook. So there's multiple threats here after knight f3. So knight f3 is probably the best move in the position. If you found it, give yourself a pat on the back. It is a brilliant position, a brilliant move. But it's not over yet. There's still possibilities for black, and we should go through these now. One other thing, well, first of all, black's going to play a check. He's trying to get his rook out into the game. Like, black's got to activate his pieces to prove that white's attack is not sound. So bishop to b4 check. The reasonable defense in what most people would play is c3, and that's totally fine. We're going to play c3, and we're going to attack this bishop. Now, in this position, if black gives up, I guess, and plays bishop to e7 or something like that, we can still play bishop to g5. And the reason we can still play bishop g5 is after bishop takes g5, we again have this rook to g1 move. And after queen h3, knight takes g5, and our attack is crushing against this black king. So, after c3, black has another really good move. Now, these were all found in post-mortem, of course, by Calanthe with the help of Stockfish. But Stockfish has some pretty tricky resources. And the first of those, actually, I might deliver this as a puzzle for you as well. Even though we, the viewers, and myself are playing white in this position against Stockfish, see what you would play as black here. Okay, hopefully you pause the video. Bishop g4 exclam. A really, really good move. Because what's happening now is we've freed up a square for our king. So now bishop g5 check moves, the king is just going to run away. Okay. Also, we're adding another attacker against the knight, so the knight is not sufficiently defended anymore, and this rook is now hanging. So we have to come up with a really good move ourselves. Excuse me. We still throw in this check. Just because it's not mating anymore doesn't mean it's good. We're going to flush the king away. And now we play queen c4, taking even more squares away from this king. King b8 is the absolute best move. If the king comes to d7, then knight takes e5. We get our knight out of danger, and this king is gonna die. My computer eventually mounts something and announces something like mate in 18. For example, if king to e8, then we have a checkmate in one move. Queen f7. It's a beautiful checkmate because the bishop's cutting off the king in this direction. But you can just look at it. Just visually as a human being, you can see that this king is just too exposed. 3 pieces is more than enough, and these rooks will eventually get in the game, maybe with a king d2 type move. So it's very dangerous for black to go here, and therefore, after queen c4 check, the king cannot come this way, cannot come down, it can't come to this square just because of the variations and just the general position we just looked at. So king to b8 is forced, pretty much. And white is better here. White is better. However, this is the position where both sides pretty much have to execute perfectly to keep it in that balance. If white makes one mistake, black either equalizes easily or takes over the initiative and checkmates white. And if black's not careful, that king is getting checkmated. And you can see that pretty clearly yourself. So after king b8, this is probably my second favorite. Well, actually, no. This is probably the second hardest move to find in the position. It took me ages to find this move. I eventually did, and I felt pretty proud and also dumb at the same time. So that may be a little hint, but give yourself some time, pause the video now, and see if you can find what you would do for white. Okay, so this move may come as a surprise if you didn't solve it, and if you did, you may feel a bit stupid like I did. The best move in this position, because our rook is hanging and our knight is hanging, is castles. Castles long. It's crazy. Because black's king has made so many moves, and because this position is so open, both these bishops, well, they're not necessarily actually attacking the king, but they're controlling or influencing a lot of squares in this position. It just seems like we can't castle. It seems like we shouldn't be able to castle, but the laws of castling allow castles. So we're going to castle. We've connected the rooks. But the question is, yes, this knight is hanging. True. Okay, fair enough. So let's have a look at, before we go too far, what are some of the other moves that don't work in this position? Well, some of the other moves that don't work in this position after king to b8 are simply taking this bishop. This move doesn't work because we're going to lose our rook, and then after king to d2, queen f3, and you're going to notice a very common reorganization of the queen using a series of checks throughout pretty much the rest of these variations against the black king. And this variation doesn't work because of one key feature here. So queen d6 is going to start a lot of these variations after the queen captures on b4, and this is what white wants to do. Now after king c8, queen c5 check, this is the first of the repositions using checks. The black queen can now come to c6 to defend. Just blocks the file, and black is simply up a rook here. Black is winning. So that's why this variation doesn't work yet. But queen takes b4 is coming very shortly. But first we need a castle to connect our rooks to make sure that that's not possible. In this position, queen takes f3, I guess, is possible. And after queen takes b4, queen takes f2 is not a good move, because that's going to allow queen d6, king c8, queen c5 check, the rerouting I was talking about, and now there's no queen to block on this diagonal, right? So now, after a move like, well, first of all, if king goes to b8, we have this check, and we're picking up the rook. Well, the king has to play to c8, and we're not just picking up one rook, we're picking up 2 rooks. So that's obviously really bad. So after queen takes f3, queen takes b4, the queen has to stay on this diagonal, and there's just not many good moves for it. This is probably a move, but in this position, because of the way that white's played this so far, white's able to actually get really active, even if we give up our rook, because this rook's slamming through the position, and this is just really nice for white. This king's not getting out, and this rook's stuck for quite some time. So, if that's not possible after castles, we have bishop takes f3, probably a more critical variation. So in this position, have a look and think yourself. This is the third and final puzzle I guess I'm going to give you, and see what you would play as white. Alright, I hope you solved the third and final puzzle. I hope you solved all of them. The correct move here is rook h to g1. The important thing to note here is if we use our other rook to come to g1, which I was going to suggest originally, the move queen h3 is a bit annoying. And rook g3 forking the bishop and queen doesn't work either, because after queen f5 defending the bishop, this rook's en prise, and we're going to save our bishop here. So say, for example, rook to e1 or something like that. Then black is just going to play bishop to d6 and be totally fine in this position. Everything's defended for black. These rooks are going to come to the center of the file. The king can probably escape with some simple moves like this. And these rooks are going to start attacking white's king. Excuse me. So that's not good for white. So white plays rook h to g1. There's two moves now for black. There's either queen h3 or queen f2, and both of them tend to reveal very similar positions, but there's a couple of subtle differences, and we'll go through them. First of all, queen takes f2. This is the first line I calculated, and really surprising that this next move I'm going to show you doesn't work, and it is probably one of my favorite moves that I've ever seen. Not the first move, the response. In this position, when I was calculating in my head, and when I was doing this, I might add, Calanthe, who was playing this game, who originally did the analysis for this, gave me key positions. He showed me a screenshot of them, and I had to calculate from there in my head. So the position I've been calculating from was this one. I calculated castles, calculated bishop takes f3, rook hg1, and then I also calculated queen takes f2. And what I wanted to play was rook d to f1. I want to win this bishop. But black has an absolutely stunning move here, and it's one of my favorite moves I've ever seen. Bishop to e2. If we take his queen, he's going to take our queen, which is really nice. And if we take his bishop here, he's probably going to take on a2. And this is completely fine for black. Our attack is basically dead, and it's not going to be very pleasant for us. He can get some activity for sure, and he can get his king, or we rather can get our king activated, but his position is completely fine after this bishop to e2 move. So after rook hg1, queen takes f2, rook f1, bishop e2. Really, really strong. And if we just move our queen, say for example we take this bishop, he can take our rook. And our attack is no longer that successful. It's probably just drawn via perpetual check. So I just need a little bit of water here because it's getting so fired up. Okay. And first of all, I acknowledge this is already a really long video, so thank you for tuning in. But I was just so excited to share this with you that I couldn't help breaking it up into parts. I couldn't do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue and go through this rest of the game, hopefully fairly quickly though. I just wanted to show this variation because of bishop to e2. Fantastic equalizing move, and one that would be, I don't know, it surprised me a lot. So instead of rook df1, what can we do? Well, this is where the variations against the black king begin. After queen takes b4, yes, our rook is hanging, but the best move here for black to survive in this position is some sort of activation of the king. Maybe a move like b6, maybe a move like a5. Basically, black has to try and get his king out of danger. If black becomes very greedy, which you'll find happens in a blitz game a lot, and probably would have happened if we somehow got to this position, bishop takes d1 is the very critical line here, and I've given it a question mark in my analysis because of this queen d6, king c8, queen c5 remanœuvering. In this position, again, if the king goes back to b8, the point of this remaneuver from the queen started on b4, remember, is that now we have this check. And we're going to pick up this rook with check. And we can either take the bishop or take his rook, and we're going to be really fine in this position. So that's the first remaneuver. So the point is, after this first check and king c8, queen c5, the king has to step up to d7. Note that the d8 square is not available because of our strong bishop on g5. So king to d7. And now there's a couple of moves. We could probably just take on d1 with our rook, threatening to open up this file. So a very common line we'll see is e4, trying to close that diagonal there. But then we've got a series of checks from against the black king because it's so exposed. Note, we're down an exchange in this position. We're down an exchange and black has this wonderful passed pawn. So if we can't find something concrete here, a concrete plan or tactic, we're in a lot of danger. You'd think as a streamer, I would be used to talking this much. Probably not excited as much as I am now in my streams. Though I do get excited in the streams. Point is, after this check, there's a couple of things that we got to worry about. Note that the queen is on this f file. So instead of queen to d5, we also have this queen b5 check, which is really interesting as well. If the king comes down to d6, it's very dangerous indeed, because this rook is coming to f1, and that's the point of the queen b5 check, is we're working with our rook to start attacking this black king. And the black queen basically has to give herself up, because if she tries to stay alive, say for example queen to g2, then this is going to get really bad after queen to e5 check, king c6, and we are just mating after rook f6. The king can go here, but after rook f7 check, the king comes back. That, my friends... Oh, that's not the best checkmate. My apologies. That's not the best checkmate. Queen c5 is, though. Queen c5. I'm getting confused because there's a lot of variations that I've looked at in this game. But more or less, you can see visually, this rook on a8 and this rook on h8 are doing nothing in the position. So black has to basically give up the queen and try and activate these guys in any way they can. Try and grab the f-file, but it's lost for black. So going back, this e4 push is not working, but in this position already here, it's already +6 for white. It's just already winning. And that's from this position here. That's why bishop takes d1 is not a good move. After queen takes f2, after we take on b4, bishop takes d1 is no good. And you'll find similar lines happen after rook hg1, queen h3. If we take this bishop again, and then bishop takes on d1, we can play the same remaneuvering, as always. And again, if the king b8, queen here, wins a rook. And after king d7, we have this again. After king c7, we'll play check on let's bring our queen to... Whoa, I've lost my mind here. Oh no, okay, sorry. We don't continue checking. After the initial repositioning and king d7, we play rook takes d1 again. Eliminate that bishop and threaten this d takes e5 move. So e4 again. And the biggest point in this position, we no longer have this idea of queen to b5 check with rook to f1, because the queen's no longer on f2. So that's the subtle difference I was talking about before. But we have lots of good moves. We have d5 moves, and we have queen to e7 check, and after king to c8, we have queen c5. Again, and sorry, queen d5 check. This is the main point. After king to c8 again, then we have queen to e5, and now we're both double attacking the rook, and we're also threatening some nasty stuff with bishop f4 and mating on on d7, c7. This is already a long video, is it not? So the rook's got to save himself somehow. If the queen moves somewhere to try and help, we're just going to take this rook. So the rook can't come to d8, we'll chop it with our bishop. Okay, the rook can't come to e8 for obvious reasons, we'll take it with our queen. If the rook comes to c8 in this to f8 in this position, queen c5 check instantly picks it up. So the only square for the rook is on g8, and then we're a couple of checks away from picking that up as well. Queen c5 check. King's got to be very careful. King b8 here trying to survive, runs into bishop to f4 checkmate. And so the only other move is king here. After queen to d5 check, the only safe square that's not on the back rank, because we're going to take this rook, the rooks have to stay connected, is king to c7. But we're going to play bishop to f4 check anyway, and the king has to run to b6. And this is just going to be disgusting after c4, and this king is running very low on squares as mate in 4. For example, queen to d7 is a defense, but we're just going to take the queen, and if you don't play a move that sacrifices the queen, how are you stopping queen to b5 checkmate? There is no defense. That's the threat. It's unstoppable. And if you play a6, you've just taken away a flight square from your king, and queen to c5 is mate. So basically, what it all boils down to is if we go way back to this position here, queen takes b4. Let's go even further back. Rook hg1 forces the queen to either square, and in either variation, queen takes f2 or queen h3, we play queen takes b4. And we're basically giving our rook for free, and if black's greedy enough to take it, we're going to win this rook. is the point of the entire variation. And not only are we going to win that rook, this rook is going to be inactive. The black king is going to be in the center of the board. And our queen, bishop, and rook and pawns, center pawns, are all going to combine to checkmate or at least win even more material against this black king. So this all of these lines, if we go back from the main line here of bishop d1, all the way back like this, stemmed from, and you'll find that these are all forced moves, which is the craziest part of this position. The bishop takes d1 blunder at the end, yes, makes the position terrible, and black can fight on with moves like, in this position here, black can fight on with moves like b6. It's not all lost, and black can fight on. But once bishop takes d1 happens, it's game over for black, and every move leading up to this position here is basically forced, or best moves only, going all the way back to our first position after queen h5, g6, queen f3, knight 7 to f6, very important. Bishop takes, queen takes is forced, queen takes f6, black has to go in for this if they want counterplay. Queen takes f7, knight f3, exclam, an amazing move. Remember, queen takes h1, not possible. Bishop check, c3, bishop to b4, bishop g4, bishop g5 check, king c8, queen c4 check, king b8. Long castles, these are all forced moves, or best moves rather. Bishop takes f3, rook hg1, queen h3 or f2. This is where black gets a choice for once, but either way, we're still going to take on b4. And in this position, b6 or something, but white is better. This entire line, it's about 20 moves long, or about 15 moves long, of all pretty much best moves only. Stockfish says black needs to play to stay in the game. Any other deviation, they lose. And white needs to play all of them to retain their edge. So it's an extremely sharp position, one that you would probably not see unless it was two super strong grandmasters playing together in a long time control. And in this position, black can err with bishop. Instead of b6, bishop takes d1, as we saw with these series of checks from white. The king is in the center. We're threatening this. e4 must be played. And as we've seen before, this rook is going to get picked up one way or another. And if the king tries to escape, then we're simply going to play c4 and mate that king. So, with all of that said, I hope you enjoyed this game. It was super interesting for me to look at tactically with Calanthe, and I think probably the best position to look at is this one here. It's black's move, and I don't want to play black. So, I know this was a long video, so if you made it to the end of the 33 minutes, thank you and congratulations. I hope you took the time yourself to study this game. I hope you took the time to pause when I recommended it, and I hope you found the moves, and if not, I hope you learned a lot from them, as I have. Calanthe, Spew, thank you for letting me review this game. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. I had a great time and learned a lot from it. And if you enjoy this sort of thing, let me know in the comments down below. If you want me to get back to my regular scheduled programming, let me know that as well. I just thought I would try something new and try this sort of analysis because obviously I'm enthusiastic about it and I love it. There's so many more variations. There's so much that I didn't get through. You could see me getting confused all over the place. In the description down below, I'm going to link an analysis of this on chess.com that I've made. You can go view that analysis board. And that's it. Let me know what you thought. Hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.